Have you ever wondered what ambition wants? Not success, money, or power. If those were enough, some people would stop climbing once they reached the top. Napoleon Bonaparte was not one of them. Born in Corsica in 1769, he rose from a modest family to become Emperor of the French. His armies dominated much of Europe, and his name became linked with military genius and extraordinary ambition. But the deeper question is, what happens when ambition has no boundary? To understand that question, we have to begin with the world that shaped Napoleon. Napoleon belonged to a generation shaped by revolution. Kings could fall, hierarchies could change, and birth no longer seemed to determine destiny. He learned early that ability becomes power when opportunity meets audacity. His military victories made him a national hero, but talent alone does not explain his rise. He wanted not merely to participate in history, but to shape it. In 1799, he seized power. In 1804, he became emperor. His rise was not built on titles alone. At Austerlitz, he defeated the combined armies of Austria and Russia in one of the most celebrated victories of his career. At Jena, Prussia was shattered. Across Europe, armies that had once seemed powerful were forced to retreat before him. His victories were so extraordinary that Napoleon began to appear almost invincible. And this is important. Ambition does not become dangerous simply because a man dreams greatly. It becomes dangerous when reality repeatedly rewards that dream. Every victory told Napoleon the same story. You were right to believe in yourself. You were right to go further. You were right not to stop. And perhaps the most dangerous thing success can give a person is not power. Evidence that his own limits do not exist. But ambition revealed its first paradox. The higher you rise, the more there is to lose. And once ambition begins to rise with a person, its question can slowly change. At first, ambition asks, what can I accomplish? Eventually, it may ask, how much can I possess? Napoleon's victories created a cycle of expansion. Each success strengthened his position, created new enemies, and demanded new campaigns. By the early 19th century, his empire stretched across much of Europe. But success had become its own justification. Yesterday's achievement became today's expectation. That is when ambition stops serving the individual, and the individual begins serving ambition. But Napoleon's understanding of power went beyond conquest alone. Napoleon understood that power requires more than force. People must believe in the person who holds it. He cultivated an image of himself as the man who could restore order after revolution. He used symbols, ceremony, law, and propaganda. The Napoleonic Code reorganized French civil law and influenced legal systems beyond France, despite its inequalities. Napoleon was not simply destroying institutions. He was building them. He understood that lasting power requires a story that makes victory meaningful. He gave France a story of glory. But glory demands expansion. And eventually, that expansion brought Napoleon to a point where ambition itself had to confront reality. In 1812, Napoleon invaded Russia with an enormous army. Russia avoided the decisive battle he wanted, and distance, winter, and supply destroyed his forces during the retreat. This exposed a philosophical weakness. Napoleon could defeat armies, but he could not command nature. Eventually, ambition encountered something it could not conquer. Limit. Human beings can achieve extraordinary things, but reality does not owe ambition obedience. And once that limit was reached, the extraordinary rise began to reverse itself. After Russia, Napoleon faced stronger coalitions. He was defeated at Leipzig in 1813, and the Allies captured Paris in 1814. He abdicated and was exiled to Elba. In 1815, he escaped, returned to France, and briefly reclaimed power. At Waterloo, on June 18, 1815, his forces were defeated by the Allied army led by the Duke of Wellington, with crucial Prussian support. Napoleon abdicated again and was exiled to St. Helena, where he died in 1821 at age 51. And after the empire had fallen, one question remained. Was Napoleon great because he conquered so much, or did his conquests reveal the danger of confusing expansion with greatness? There is a difference between becoming greater and wanting more. Napoleon possessed discipline, courage, intelligence, and leadership. But ambition without restraint can turn virtues into weapons against their owner. Courage becomes recklessness. Confidence becomes arrogance. Vision becomes obsession. Leadership becomes domination. Success becomes the inability to stop. That is why Napoleon remains fascinating. His life reveals a human contradiction. We want greatness, but rarely ask what greatness will demand. And perhaps this is where Napoleon's story reaches beyond history and becomes a lesson about ambition itself. Ambition is not the enemy. Without it, discoveries remain undiscovered and civilizations stagnate. The danger begins when ambition loses its purpose, when achievement becomes identity, victory becomes necessity, and the next mountain matters more than why you are climbing. Napoleon climbed higher than almost anyone of his generation, but his story suggests that the highest form of ambition may be mastering the force within yourself that always demands more. The question is not whether you can climb. It is, when you reach the summit, will you know why you climb? Ambition can build an empire and make the impossible seem possible. But without wisdom, the force that carries a person upward can also bring them down. Greatness requires ambition, but ambition requires a master. Otherwise, the person who conquers the world may never learn to conquer himself.